number one. Let's see. Who we got for your number one?
My number one, and this is something that I think a lot of people might disagree with. Most people would put, like I said, Buchanan at number one. But my number one worst president of all time is going to be, drum roll please, Andrew Johnson. I think Andrew Johnson is the absolute worst because he's the guy after Lincoln who, you know, your whole thing is, bro, you won the Civil War. You just have to maintain Reconstruction, get the country back together, and ensure the rights of the people who the freaking Civil War was fought over. Just make sure that the black people are taken care of in the South because most of them, the vast majority of them, still live in the South. And he's just like, nah, I'm just gonna let the South do whatever, and they can treat them any kind of way, and you know, white supremacy is good, and just, you know, fuck all that. Let's just no. And so yeah, it's just terrible policy after terrible policy. Basically, tries to derail Reconstruction in its entirety. And honestly, the failures of Reconstruction, obviously, they lead to like a century of black disenfranchisement and just horrors for African Americans in the South for like until the 1960s and 70s. But also, too, a lot of the stuff we're dealing with to this day come from the fact that we didn't secure Reconstruction properly, and we didn't, you know, get certain rights in writing and do things. And obviously, we passed some good amendments and things like that. But a lot of the failures of Reconstruction is the reason why society is still so damaged to this day. And you can pinpoint a good 60 to 70% of those failures on this guy right here. So yeah, to me, he's the absolute worst. And just as an executive leader, he's just shitty. Just in general, just not a good president from just even an administrative standpoint. First to get impeached for a reason. But yeah, for me, this guy takes the cake. He is the worst president of all time. That's my opinion, but I think it's backed by a lot of facts as well.
Yeah, this is actually what gave me the idea to do this live. Like a couple weeks back, you were talking, and I made a comment, something that I said that I thought Andrew Jackson was the worst president. No, I thought Andrew Jackson was the worst person to be president, and Andrew Johnson was the worst president. And you said like, "Oh, I agree about Andrew Johnson being the worst president." You said that. So that's actually gave me this idea for this, because holy shit, folks! Like people do not understand how bad of a fucking president Andrew Johnson is. Like, no one talks about this. Like, James Buchanan gets more hate than Andrew Johnson, and I think Johnson's way worse. Like, way worse. I mean, rest in piss. This guy is horrible. And it's like, and honestly, he's so bad that it actually puts a black mark on Lincoln's legacy. Like, so like it for
vice president,
Yeah, like he didn't have to. He did it as like an olive branch to the South because Johnson was from, I think, Tennessee or something like that. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna show the South that, you know, we're all in this together, no hard feelings. I'm gonna select one of you as my VP, and look what fucking happened. Like, look what fucking happened. And it's like, so when Lincoln was assassinated, there was actually like a whole conspiracy to assassinate everyone in the line of succession. Like, they had someone assassinate Lincoln, Johnson, Speaker of the House. I mean, everyone down the line. And I was like, my God, why couldn't the Johnson guy have been successful? Like, why couldn't they have shot Johnson and left us with Lincoln? I was like, and look, we don't know how good of a job Lincoln would have done. I mean, it couldn't have been worse than Johnson. No. There's no chance in hell it could have been worse than Johnson. And like you said, Johnson was like, it is, his history too is interesting. Like, Johnson was a drunk. I think he was drunk at his own inauguration.
Yes. I think the story goes that he had like a toothache or something, and so he said, "I got a toothache. Let me just down a bottle of whiskey. That'll help. That'll help my toothache." And then he gets on, and then as he's getting inaugurated vice president, he's just up there slurring his words, saying crazy stuff. In fact, he even thought that he would never be president because he did so bad at that inauguration that he's like, I've shamed myself. I'll never be president. But good old John Wilkes Booth made it so that he would be president. And we have that to now thank for the awfulness of, and he does this a lot. Like, as president, he's just constantly making these drunken speeches. He goes on these campaign tours where or not even campaign tours. They're just like I just want to talk to the public tours, where he's just like drunk everywhere he goes and just says crazy shit. And people literally in the audience will like say, "Yo, bro, you're drunk. What is this?" And he'll like yell at him and shit. It's like, such like I wish we had like cameras or at least tape recorders, because I want to know, because these speeches were so bad, no one ever kept records of them. Like, there's no record of exactly what he was saying because you couldn't even, he was slurring half the words, you couldn't even write it down. And I want to know what he was saying and how he was going about it, because all I know is there's just so many accounts of him just going on these drunken tirades and just going back and forth with people. It just, and I really wish I could find a transcript and compare it to the average Trump speech, just to kind of compare and contrast and see just which one is worse.
Yeah, it is funny reading about Johnson's exploits and everything. Like before, during, and after his presidency, is just like I think Johnson was illiterate, like he was, or he was self-taught, like he taught himself in school, and went to some law school or whatever, or something like, I can't remember, but like his education was really bare bones. And then he ascended to the vice presidency of the presidency. There was never. It's actually hard to find a convergence of worst person at a worst possible time. Like it really is. Like it's genuinely hard to think of someone who was less equipped to handle the situation than Andrew Johnson, and didn't seem to realize how badly equipped he was at this. And also, this is weird too. Like, you ever see someone who is so like whenever you're little, or I don't know if you're not little or not, but you're playing sports against somebody. Like say you're playing basketball or something, and you're a couple of minutes into this game, and you realize your opponent is like, okay, this guy sucks. He's terrible. Like this is why are you even on the same quarters? This is awful. And I have that sometimes with people in thinking, where you're debating them. You're like, oh, okay, you're a moron. Okay, I see what's going on here. And you start to, and then my brain starts to wonder, it's like, wait, don't you realize you suck? If I am just stinking it up, like if I am dropping the passes or my arguments are getting crushed, I realize immediately, oh my God, I am blowing it here. This happened to Johnson his entire presidency. Yeah. Like the Republicans kept dunking on him at every opportunity, and he never let up. He's like, nope, I'm doing this obviously stupid plan. You guys can't stop me, and I'm not going to care. And then I remember like the impeachment. Yeah, Johnson was the first president to be impeached. It was always a trivia question that I'd always ask. I can't do it anymore because of Trump, but I would ask people, hey, who was the only president? And they would always say Nixon. It's like, no, Nixon was not impeached. Like, because they don't know what impeachment means, but everyone does now. But he is my example of how impeachment is fucking useless, how it doesn't matter at all. And because you need a 2/3 majority in the Senate to remove them. The closest we got was if we couldn't get Andrew Johnson removed from office, nobody is getting removed from office. Okay, it's not going to fucking happen. So, and you mentioned something that I say all the time about Reconstruction. And Johnson hampered Reconstruction from the start. And it kind of limped along for a few more years until they finally ended and everything, crippling the Freedmen's Bureau and fighting the radical Republicans every step of the way. Is that thanks to Andrew Johnson, the Civil War never ended. It never did. Like we say it did. Like the Confederacy surrendered at Appomattox in 1865. But for the last 160 years, they're still fighting like the same culture battles and stuff. And what they were allowed to do, you did a video on this once about the black codes and everything, and how just standing around outside and being black was illegal. Like literally, you couldn't just stand. Loitering laws or public intoxication, like complete bullshit. There was a I saw this article from 1923, and it was in South Carolina, and there was a law that said black women were forced to get jobs. They were forced to get jobs because white women didn't have maids and dishwashers and it's like, oh, well, these people need to get to work. And so they put in a law saying that, able-bodied black women need to have a job or you're going to go to jail. Like that. This shit continued all the way after the Civil War. And we have Andrew Johnson to thank for this. It is not entirely his fault, but most of it is his fault. Like he could have done a lot to stop this, and he just didn't. So I agree completely with that number one. All right. So
I'm very curious what your number one is going to be.
I debated this one because I have to admit to everybody, I'm still going with this bit here. All right. I know I said I would stop it, but I know it's a surprise. But I'm still going with the fictional president bit. But I almost switched things up and put Ronald Reagan as my number one. I thought that would have been funny because like, but I wouldn't put Reagan as my number one. Reagan's up there. Like he'd probably be in my top 5. He's not in yours. He's probably because it's weird to separate these because if I was really saying who were the worst, they would all be in the 1800s pretty much. Like they were just terrible all the way through. But Reagan, I say, is the worst president of the last 50 years. I think he was worse than Bush just because especially the economic effects of Reagan are so incredibly powerful, and that every president has emulated Reagan since then. Everyone's just tried to be Reagan. I did a thing a while ago about presidential salutes and how that wasn't a thing until Ronald Reagan. That's actually genius. It's actually genius. I'm surprised no other president did that because it does look cool. Like it actually does look cool. It does. And like, it makes sense that Reagan thought of it because he understood the showmanship of it. Yeah. And now all the presidents salute when before, because you look at old videos of like Nixon or Kennedy or Eisenhower just walking by someone. It's like, that's rude as fuck. What are they doing? It's like, no, that's actually protocol. That's the president is not in the military. So you don't salute, but I don't know. It's